So Hilary and Rudy, it's fantastic to see you. And I think the last time that we were actually in person was back in 2016, when you guys came to London to speak at MozFest. But we've kind of stayed in touch since then, and I'm really delighted that you're joining us today for this blended webinar. So we'll get stuck in straight away to the questions, if that's okay. You both work for Dreamyard. Hilary, can you tell us about Dreamyard project, what you do, what it's all about, and something about your role, and then Rudy, we'll go to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, Sarah. So good to see you. I miss the days we could see each other in person. But yeah, Dreamyard is where Rudy and I both work. We've both been there, I won't say how long, several years, and worked a lot together. And Dreamyard's mission is that we collaborate with Bronx youth, families, and schools to build pathways to equity and opportunity through the arts. So that's our mission statement. We're in the Bronx in New York City in the United States. The organization's been around for over 25 years, and we're one of the largest arts education providers in the Bronx, in that one borough of New York City. And we do all of our work with a focus on racial equity and social justice pedagogy as well. We sometimes when you say arts, people just think visual arts for whatever reason, but we do like all kinds of arts form, and we're always expanding. So we have kind of the traditional arts of visual arts, theater, poetry, dance, and then especially Rudy and I, we work a lot in like newer forms that bring in some more technology. So like music production, fashion, we've tried maker programs, now gaming and entrepreneurship and design, which you'll hear about from me and from Rudy. And then we have a few spaces we work in. So we're kind of always adding spaces too, but we have, we work a lot in public schools. So in the kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. We have an art center where we do after school and Saturday programs for free. And Rudy started BX Start recently as a space focused on gaming and entrepreneurship. And then we have a high school called Dreamyard Prep. And we also now are doing tons of virtual programming, which I'm sure we'll talk about, including summer internships. And then real quick, I'm the director of digital learning. That's always been my role. It changes every year in terms of what that means, but I do a lot of work with Rudy, and we integrate tools and practices related to new technologies into our existing programs. We do PD around that for our teaching artists to kind of keep upping their skills and getting them to transfer skills across each other. And then we partner with other organizations to bring in new skills and new programs. And then this past year, which I know we're going to get into, has been a lot more digital equity work. So even just that basic access around broadband and technology has been a lot of my work personally. That's our overview.
And I was very lucky enough to come out on a study visit to New York back. It's a long time ago now. I think it was 2014 when I first met you and came to Dreamyard, which was amazing and inspirational. And yeah, and it's been fantastic to keep that link with the Connected Learning Centre in London. And we're always checking in on what we're doing respectively. And there's often synergies. So thank you for giving us that context. And Rudy, could you introduce yourself and also say something about your kind of career journey? Because I think it's quite an interesting one in terms of like where you started out as a teacher and coming to Dreamyard, and also some of the things that you're doing like beyond Dreamyard as well now with the Bronx Gaming Network.
You got it. Hi, Sarah. Thank you again, as Hilary said, for having us and for inviting us to this. And I'd love to share a little more. So my name is Rudy Blanco. I am, for Dreamyard, I am the director of entrepreneurship and gaming. What that means is my work dabbles in the intersection of those two massive industries or massive areas. And over the last 2 years, I've been working with Dreamyard and with our community to figure out where do the two intersect and how do we create programming, not just for young people, but also our alumni. Because as Hilary said, like we've been around for 25 years and we primarily serve K through 12, but through our work with gaming and entrepreneurship, we are now able to start providing program and essential experiences for young people within our ecosystem once they graduate high school. So it's super exciting for that. But Sarah, you're right. My career journey is an odd one. It is not the career journey that you hear, from a lot of people regarding education, at least. So the way it was for me, I did corporate for a while, right out of college. And as soon as I couldn't do the sitting at a desk thing. And I saw an ad in the subway or in the tube. It was, do you want to work with young people? Do you want to change the world? It was one of these very cliche like ads for a fellowship program to become a teacher, specifically for people that had not taught. Right. So this was a unique program that was for people that had no, history with education whatsoever. And I went and I wanted a career switch, applied. After the program, I did 3 years of special education at Dreamyard Preparatory High School. So once I got my transitional license, I was looking for schools to work. And the only school that came to mind is my keywords. It was all about the keyword search, So I was searching arts, I was searching activism, I was searching, the things that I'm passionate about. And Dreamyard Preparatory High School popped up. I got a chance to meet, our principal, interviewed. For 3 years, I taught as a special education history teacher and algebra teacher for students with developmental behavioral needs. And after the third year, the city announced that they wanted to change the way in which we administered standardized tests, right? They wanted to go from paper to digital. And if you follow the trends of technology and the Department of Education, right, like it's all over the place. But this 1 year, I was concerned because of the population that I served, like they were already struggling with the paper test. And now to add on that extra layer of taking standardized tests online, the city hadn't figured it out, but the notices were put out. And from there, I went to our principal, was able to craft a technology coordinator position to anticipate all of that, which took me away from the Department of Education. And then I met Hilary, who taught me about the Digital Media Learning Conference, which was a conference we went out to in California, my 4th year teaching. And that's where I learned that there were other educators and this whole movement around, like education and technology kind of coming together and finding the best tools to do the work. And around my 5th year, I created a student group called the Mouse Squad. And the Mouse Squad was essentially, we are in one of the poorest, or not, I don't like using the deficit language, like we're in an underrepresented district, a highly underrepresented district that gets underfunded and undercut a lot of the times. And what's happening was that when we started doing this work, we realized that our young people just, the educators and the young people that we just didn't have the access. We didn't have the technology, and our schools were bombarded with IT requests that we couldn't meet, right? So what did we do? We gathered up our techies, the kids who really wanted to do something after school. I threw in a PlayStation and a Switch, and after school, folks were coming in and we would fix our tech issues. And the idea was that we would put them into a career pathway to do stuff like working at Best Buy's Geek Squad or the Apple's Care Team and stuff like that. And from there, there was a huge interest for media creation, media editing, and gaming, which then let us know that there's so much more to gaming than just the coding aspect, because everyone who was giving us, or everyone who was funding this type of work was usually funding technical related coding based work. And then the year we started training young journalists to review games, that just changed the whole game for us. And we started realizing that gaming itself, or I started kind of realizing that gaming itself was so much more than just that technical piece. And then we started looking at all of the creative sectors within gaming, and entrepreneurship in gaming kind of came from that. And now we're just trying to move forward to produce programming.
So we're going to go kind of a bit deeper into all of that in a minute, Rudy, to kind of find out a bit more about that whole kind of entrepreneurship and creative media and gaming. But before we do that, could you also say just a bit about, I mean, God, we could talk about the effect of COVID for hours on end, couldn't we? But just a little bit about what it's been like during the pandemic for young people and teachers in the Bronx. I know earlier we were talking about the kind of normification and kind of digital literacy, things we've all been working on for a long time, but of course, the pandemic's coming along. So maybe just a little bit about the experience, but also something about how educators have been using technology, how young people have been using technology.
So from my experience, since COVID started, since quarantine started, right, we found ourselves in a place, or let me speak first for myself, right? In this place where we had to learn a whole new job. And luckily I had been doing this digital work, right? But for every other teacher who either had not subscribed to the tech approach to education or was not familiar with the approaches, like there were a lot of struggles, and teachers were now doing two jobs. Students were now in a place where they had to choose between in-person or quarantine. Then for a while, everyone was out. So the change and the I guess the chaos of it all kind of it has, from my experience and the people that I've been working with and the young people and parents I've been talking to and educators, like it's people aren't sure, you know, and I don't know. It's one of these things where we have to find peace with the fact that we don't know. And I found myself talking to some of our young people, like people expect me to know, are we going back next year? Are we doing this? And as of today, right, or Hill, I think it was last week, I don't know if you saw, like when the announcement came out about their 100% coming back, you know, in September to open back up. And, you know, folks come to us and say, hey, how's it going to be? And we're like, you know, like we're still working on that. But for the most part, it's been a lot of our young people have turned to gaming, right? And finding community and finding that social component that was missing throughout quarantine. They jumped into things like Discord and gaming to create that community and fill those needs. As far as teachers are concerned, staff and administrations, from the people that I talk to, like they're still trying to figure out, you know, what this is going to look like. I mean, they never even fully finished figuring out what virtual was. And I have a feeling that, you know, we're all going into a place where education is just different, you know, and now there's no other reason or excuse for things to not happen, either when absences go on, right? I've heard conversations about, well, does that mean that if you're absent, right, like you can still do the work, or, you know, just concepts are changing and the way we do education is changing.
Thank you. And Hilary, I know that you've been particularly involved in some of the digital equity programs. And I guess that's the other thing, is like actually for a lot of families, young people, they haven't had access to technology during the pandemic.
Yeah. So for us in the Bronx, like the pandemic just made the existing challenges more obvious. So we already knew they were there. There was a digital divide in the Bronx. It was related to generations of like systemic racism and economic disinvestment in the borough. From school to school, like I remember, Rudy, like even within, we have a large campus building where our high school is, but there's like 7 other high schools like on different floors. And you could just walk from school to school. One would have all Mac computers, one had just some Chromebook laptops, you know, like school to school, there's a lot of disparity, and also house to house, just depending on income and comfort with technology. And so in true Bronx style, the community stepped up and we helped each other, and it was already happening, but we kind of came together even more. And beyond tech, it was, we became part of something called the Bronx Community Relief Effort, which is related to something called the Bronx Community Foundation. So there was some money and funding put there for like housing insecurity for small businesses, for food insecurity. And then Dreamyard stepped up to organize folks around education and technology. And we created this group that met weekly, all kinds of different organizations, from our public universities to the library to a lot of small nonprofits. And now it's a year later, and we're calling ourselves the Bronx Digital Equity Coalition. We're doing things like, one of the organizations, Perscolis, has created a community help desk. We helped create a lending library, so like giving out laptops and headphones. Like headphones are a big thing. Like just having headphones made a difference for some people. There's one organization called The Point. They're in a neighborhood called Hunts Point, and they've been building community mesh networks and training community members as digital stewards. So as a coalition, we're trying to like honor that model and help them find support so they can share that model more across the borough, and just like identify the needs that we're seeing, lift up the existing solutions in the community. We're not looking for someone to come in and like save us, but we already have solutions. We just need more resources. And then how do we like share our power to advocate for more digital equity? Because I don't know if everybody knows the Bronx, but it, you know, gets sometimes a reputation of being the poorest congressional district in the United States. And but it's a beautiful, I always say, like the most creative borough in New York City. It's where trends are started. It's where hip hop comes from. There's so much talent and energy. There's people from all over the world. There's tons of different languages being spoken. But we don't always get the investment and resources that are needed. So we're just trying to like broaden the spotlight, and also make sure that if the pandemic goes away, that the spotlight doesn't stay off that as well, because the problem was here before. Got even worse during the pandemic, and it's going to remain after unless we do something about it. So
keeping
that's
that
become a huge part of my job this past year.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a real momentum, and that's going to keep on going. Thank you. And then jumping back now to Rudy, can you tell us about the Bronx Gaming Network? So I know this is something that's kind of in partnership with Dreamyard, but separate. And just tell us kind of what does this look like, and what are the young people doing, and how is this helping them in their career pathways? And it's a fascinating story.
Sure. Thank you for asking, Sarah. I appreciate it. And this is actually the first year Bronx Gaming Network is public, which is, it's interesting because it's been about 5 years in the making, like this whole gaming entrepreneurship work, and specifically the gaming piece. And what the Bronx Gaming Network is essentially a stepping stone for Dreamyard's programming and what we do with young people around the creative careers, and specifically gaming specific creative careers. So for example, like theater is one of the disciplines we work on, but let's say visual arts applies more to gaming and visual products than theater does. So what BGN does is we essentially guide young creatives and gamers to and through their career. So we start as young as 5 years old, right? And we do things like the gamer sitter. Like one of our first product is we're revealing the gamer sitter, right? We found that through our work with Dreamyard, like we're finding that parents want some time, especially now because of COVID. Like they're looking for time for their kids to feel safe and while they're online in a way that's not making them paranoid. So one of the things we started doing is we're looking to employ high schoolers, right, to sit down with younger ones and serve as a babysitter, but like a gamer sitter, right? So they're going to play, these games with these young people, and we're developing the guidelines to train these community moderators, because we're finding that a lot of these little jobs that are appearing through the Bronx Gaming Network and that are gaming specific are actually stepping stones for a lot of the other careers that are in the industry. So what we're doing now is essentially we are training content creators, right? And we want to show young people that from an early age, it's important to be able to find safe communities that you can play in. Play, if you do the research, right? We all know play has a very important role in the lives of human beings and socializing. And what we're doing with the Bronx Gaming Network is we're normalizing gaming as a thing. And a lot of my work with not just in Dreamyard, but also with the Bronx Gaming Network is speaking to a lot of adults and professionals in showing them the value in beginning to put work into things that are gaming and gaming adjacent. Because I've shared with folks that I've stopped using the word gaming so much in the circles that I function in, because it tends to shut people down. In places where, if you use the term emerging media, right, which I know is always changing, right? But I found that strategically, when you speak to folks about emerging media and how gaming ties to that and how visual design ties to that, I mean, there's so many different career pathways that it's hard to just describe in this one call. However, what's cool about it is that Dreamyard programs, now I'm able to go in, and having started this gaming space here in the Bronx called BX Start through Dreamyard, right? We're now able to have a place where gamers who have been meeting for the last year through the Bronx Gaming Network digitally are now, everyone is, when can we meet in person, right? So it looks like this year that we've had off, that has had us, create new jobs for young people and for professionals that are already educators. They're all excited to kind of upskill and kind of come back and join programs that can take them to that next level, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's pretty awesome, the fact that there's interest in it, and to kind of wrap this piece up, one of the coolest things that we did this year with Dreamyard was in collaboration with Games for Change. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're international. They're an awesome group, and we did this initiative in collaboration with them called Raising Good Gamers. And the idea with Raising Good Gamers is that instead of trying to eliminate toxicity from online communities with young people, we have to make our young people aware, because toxicity is not going away. Companies can't do anything about it. So long as people can remain anonymous, right? Like there's always going to be something that's going on there. So we spent 9 weeks with middle schoolers, and they came up with a pledge around how it is that they want to behave, how it is that they want to be interacted with. They came up with the values that are important for young gamers. And from there, now we're beginning to build that, which now we have high schoolers that are working on building a Minecraft version of the Bronx. We have one of our teaching artists who is teaching poetry through Fortnite, right? So he went into this sandbox version of Fortnite, built this entire pyramid, and he calls it the Fortnite pyramid. And he'll walk kids through it for 45 minutes. Everyone walks out with a poem, but in the end, they play a match or they play a battle. And it kind of gives it that nice sense of, hey, we're playing, we're also creating. And what we're also doing is on Roblox, we're redeveloping the Bronx. And we're in a place where we just want to show the young people that are coming to our community that their communities and the places that they grew up and the things that they're used to seeing and being a part of are also digitized and exist in asset form in the games that they're creating and the content that they're consuming.
Amazing. I love that idea about the values and the safety, which is not something that, you know, a lot of people would associate with those kind of gaming communities.
And you have to take it back earlier too, you know, like if you start teaching these values like at a young age, and you teach kids at 5 or 6 how to call it out, or that's not nice, you know, in a right way, they grow into it, which is the whole premise of this study, right? Like we have to raise these types of gamers, because it's not going to go away with gamers that exist. Even a 13-year-old today is very hard to unlearn whatever toxic habits they happen, because my research has found that most of that socialization happens between as early as 4 years old. And this is mind blowing, right? As early as 4, and it starts settling in and taking root as early as maybe 8 or 9. So by 8 or 9, they've learned toxic behavior and habits that will carry them throughout the rest of their lives. And they can hit 50, 60 years old still playing, right? And still, you know, doing these things that a lot of times, just like racism, right? And we have biases and we have other things, like we grow into them, and that's scary for me. So it's important to start working with the younger group now, and doing it in a tiered way where, let's say, once our younger ones are done, they're mentoring the 5th graders. The 6th to 8th graders are mentoring the kindergarten through 5th. The high schoolers mentor, you know, like we have to scale it up in a way that kind of keeps giving back, which makes it interesting because people want to fund work like that. It's sustainable.
That's given me lots of ideas, a totally different take on kind of, you know, what we call online safety. And then just thinking about that whole kind of entrepreneurship piece. And Hilary, I know that Dreamyard is doing a lot around career pathways and design. And just thinking that, like, how does that link up with some of the things that Rudy's been talking about in terms of gaming and career pathways? But I know you've been involved in this big project in the Bronx around design, creative design pathways. Could you say a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think the keywords, Rudy, for this conversation will be like pathways and ecosystems, and like culture as well. Because so before the pandemic, at Dreamyard, we were gathering people together both in the Bronx, but also across the city, to map out existing pathways into design fields, in particular for Bronx youth. So we're like, how can Bronx youth get more into design? And we use the word pretty broadly. We don't just mean graphic design. Like there's so many different ways that you can do design, right? Gaming as well, fashion. And we know there's a ton of amazing Bronx-based designers and designers of color out there. But the field is really dominated by white folks and male identified folks. And there's like a dominant culture in design that not everybody always feels like welcome in. So what we're trying to do is both help young people in the Bronx learn the different ways in. So whether it's a program or, you know, our public university is called CUNY, and there's design programs, and getting them more aligned. We were talking to folks at Parsons, people at different design agencies, looking at like introductory like job descriptions, and we were trying to like look across all of that and like, are we even saying the same words? Like we did this whole mapping thing on the wall, and we're like, here's all the programs, here's all the ways in, but like Parsons is saying this, and then when you go for get a job, it's like totally different language. And how can we start aligning more of what we're talking about? And then it's not just preparing young people in the Bronx for this design world, which is still white and male dominated and has a dominant culture, but it's also like, how do you work with the agencies to shift their culture and make sure that it is more inclusive and equitable for more folks and like their hiring practices. So it's not just the one way, it's like, how are we in conversation with each other? And so we're doing that a lot. And I think, you know, one, there's just overlap with the fields around design and gaming and media and entrepreneurship, but really it's just about whatever field we're working in. It could be even dance or entrepreneurship. How are we building an ecosystem? How are we recognizing that maybe some folks from the Bronx don't have that network because of like where their parents work or just like culturally what's happening? How can we help build that network? And not, again, not just like a one way, how do we connect them into Manhattan and like super awesome design firms, but like, how do you create a network of young designers in the Bronx? Or how do you create a network of like entrepreneurs of color in the Bronx, and then have them start working that tiered way that Rudy said. So I think it's really about thinking about ecosystems and then pathways through that ecosystem, and not just pathways to some other place, but like, how do you build the ecosystem and the pathway in the Bronx, and then also bridge it to other spaces as well, so that they have that agency along the pathway.
And I know that in the US, as in the UK, there's often funding for kind of more like the coding and kind of creating coders and things. I think you're thinking kind of much more broadly than that, aren't you? Kind of, but actually that type of creative digital career isn't necessarily getting the same kind of funding as the coding pathways.
Yeah, I think, you know, just the word coding is accessible in some ways, because when you say computer science, other people will run away, right? Same way where you said gaming, and then like I might identify as a gamer, so I run away. So you have to be careful about your language. And I think we see, you know, Rudy and I have been doing this work for like over 10 years now, and then educators for even longer, but we see trends in funding. And then there's like big foundations that get to kind of like set the trends, or even like individuals who get to set the trends. And that dictates kind of where an organization like ours has to go if we want to get that funding. And we often try to push back a little bit. But so for a while, it was like the MacArthur Foundation in the United States was funding the whole digital media and learning field. And that was great. And we had great research around it. And it was pretty open in terms of like what form people were taking. But then they shut down that part of the MacArthur Foundation after funding for 10 years and giving a lot and supporting a lot of our work. And then I feel like what filled that void was the coding and computer science, which is very necessary. And we want to make sure that that is accessible to all of our young people, like at all ages. But I think sometimes when you start with coding, you lose people immediately, in particular identities that are not like dominant in the field, which again is white and male, often cisgendered. And so I think at Dreamyard, when we don't have an exact coding program, but when we try to bring in coding, we try to tie it to something else. So like, what's coding plus music production? In Brooklyn, there's an amazing organization called STEM from Dance, and they bring together like coding and dance, which I think is really beautiful. And I really want to work with them more. And I mean, actually, and then Rudy, like you kind of did the opposite, where like you could have gone really deep into coding with gaming and game design, but you are really focusing on all the other careers around gaming, because there is so much of a focus on coding and game design, but there's like this whole ecosystem and world around gaming. So I think we like coding, but there's just other things that should be getting funded and should be getting a spotlight on them. And then always like computer science or computational thinking plus what, like, or start with the what and then bring in the computational, which I think is probably similar to work that you've done as well. But that's kind of the way that we're thinking about it, and like knowing what the trends are, but also trying to push back on them a little bit to make sure that the young people that we work with are really being reached.
So it's that kind of real world learning. Thank you, Hilary.
I hear that. And Sarah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to reply something that Hilary had said. I was like, yo, like it makes me think so much, Hill, about, are you familiar with the concept of, or are either of you familiar with the concept of guilds, right? Like, I mean, there's real world guilds, but then in games, right? Like in-game guilds, and in anime, like Japanese animation, like this concept of a space that people can sign up and be a part of to serve the greater community, is something that is, to be honest with you, and I never even realized until I'm saying this now, like since I was a kid, I think it's what's driven me to kind of to this place with BX Star, right? Like this need, like for me, the earliest version of a guild for me was like the New York Public Library, right? And I didn't, and this is insane. Like I'm getting goosebumps because I'm realizing this now, like during this conversation, right? But a place where you can go in and kind of do stuff for the greater good is awesome, but more importantly, for the sense of upskilling, Hill. And you were talking about how when we did that pathways planning thing, it's like you have all these heads at the table and all these people who are doing great things and, you know, have all these programs to offer, but the language is inconsistent across the board, even if it's the same position. So it got me to thinking, like, what does it look like for a guild approach to pathways, right? Where someone can walk in and it's like, hey, I want to be a ninja. If you want to be a ninja, cool. Like, you know, like, and this is what it is. What does that mean? Partnerships with some mixed martial arts organizations, some physical fitness places, right? Like all of these possible pathways are completely mappable, right? It's just the amount of work it takes to track them from, you know, the end position all the way back is massive, you know, and you can't do that when you apply to grants that are code specific, because a lot of it is focused on code instruction and the development of the professional who can teach that. And it's one of the reasons I kind of decided, as opposed to just focusing on the coding piece, let's flip it around, you know, and through the Bronx Gaming Network and kind of putting together a theory of change for the Bronx Gaming Network, I started realizing that the market share of the industry, right, so much more of it is actually on the gaming support, on the support side. Granted, the gaming production piece brings in a big chunk of the pie. Without that supportive side, the piece can't be produced. And what we're finding is that if you teach a young kid or a young person how to edit a video at an early age that is tied to gaming, they are now, without even knowing it, being trained to be able to work as a community manager for a future gaming company that needs someone to sit down and go through videos and create content that leads to careers in social media marketing and advertising. But they're not aware of it, the participants, right? Neither are the educators. And right now I'm finding through the Bronx Gaming Network that, you know, and luckily because I'm blessed to work at Dreamyard, I've been able to explore the work deeply. But even within our own organization, right, and other nonprofits, like we're at the fringe of, hey, we need to really be on this. And it's something that's really, really just interesting to think about.
So how do you get the educators involved, and how do you get the educators to kind of see the potential in all of this?
Well, the first is pay. It's always pay at first. Right? But then you always have to consider, because I don't have, let's say, starting capital, and luckily, again, because I'm also working and collaborating with Dreamyard as their, you know, person running this gaming stuff, we have a great connection of educators whom are already a part of our ecosystem that understand the value that Dreamyard has to offer. So one of the things that we've been doing is, since COVID started, like the last thing people want to hear about is gaming. I'm going to be honest, you know, like and even with Dreamyard's name and even with all the great work, right? Like when people are trying to figure out how to survive, right, and how to stay afloat, the last thing they want to talk about is gaming. Entrepreneurship, a little easier because it ties to revenue and income for, you know, support, but gaming is the last thing. So what we've been doing is that as we develop programs, we need a unique type of educator, right? It's an educator that overlaps with gaming in some way, shape, or form. And there are a lot of them, but there is shame tied to the role of gamer. So a lot of my work is trying to figure out, how do we rename it, reclaim it, right? How do we do that out so that we can entice educators who are also gamers to come on out, because there are ways to create, you know, content and create lessons and learning experiences that, quite frankly, okay, perfect example. There is a history teacher at our high school, you know, Miss Brown. She teaches 10th grade global history, and that is the year where they start giving standardized tests, right? So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sid Meier's Civilization. This game's been around like for a while. Essentially, it's a simulator that takes you through the beginning of a civilization all the way through the end, whether it ends in nuclear war or whether it ends in you being the king of the world or the queen of the world. The idea is that it is based off of historical fact, right? And historical artifacts and geography and things that, because of the work I'm doing, I know, and as a former history teacher, I know damn well, and I know very, very well that a curriculum that's aligned on top of a game like Sid Meier's can serve as a supplement to create such intense learning opportunities, right? We talk to kids, look at this, like the first 4 years teaching, every time we asked our young people after a year's worth of global education, why was it, or why is it that having a civilization by a river matters, right? Like they talk about it, they read about it, they theorize about it, they write essays about it, but no one ever really knows that, because, or not that they don't know, it's just Sid Meier's gives you the opportunity where if you don't farm by the river, you're not gonna get yields and you're going to lose, right? So that has never, ever really happened, or it has happened, but it hasn't been presented in a way that makes it relevant and trendy, both for educators and young people. And so Mary, one day I went live on Twitch and I'm streaming the game and I invite some of my educator friends, about 15 educators show up, and Mary's like, let's do this. Let's do this. So now we're working this summer to figure out how do we, and she's the instructional specialist, I'm the gaming expert, right? Kind of coming in. And also because I have that special education background, I'm familiar with all of that, which is what I mean about it takes a new type of educator, a unique type of educator, whether you game or not, but if you're at least open to it, you're opening yourself for not just the job that you have now, but a new type of job that probably won't even be out until maybe the next 3 or 5 years, according to research. That, so like it's a thing, and I'm trying to figure out how to bring more people on. But right now our success has been mostly with teaching artists. The teaching artists that we hire, it's much easier to get them to engage with something like this. But even so, we're always looking for that gaming aspect of it, so that we can nurture it and grow it.
And I know you're not advocating that kind of formal education should be using Twitch and so on, but can you say something actually about some of the platforms? So like you talked about Discord. I know you said earlier about kind of using Fortnite for teaching poetry, but could you say something about kind of what's so powerful about Twitch and also Discord, and how that's worked well?
So 9.82 billion hours watched last month alone on Twitch, right? And what's unique about that is that if people are watching on Twitch, they're also watching on YouTube, right? And everyone knows YouTube, but actually Twitch has 80% of all total hours streamed come from Twitch, but everyone believes that Twitch is for those of you that aren't familiar, Twitch is a live streaming platform that mostly gets used by gamers, and they go live and they play their games. But what I'm finding is that the platform is go live for anybody. You have people who are makeup artists who are going live, DJs who are going live, fashionistas who are coming on, creating, content and doing things. And it's easy. It's also the easiest platform to monetize, which means that it's very easy within a month to be able to start bringing in income for you to start, making money off of the content that you are creating, which served as a big boost for a lot of our young people. And when we started doing research, we found that not just young people, even our college age students and even folks older than that have been trying to monetize their content for a while with very little success. And when I started, and actually this is one of those things where had COVID not happened, I don't think this pathway type of thing would have happened, but the shutdown of all things physical forced me to kind of start looking for other platforms to engage our young people and engage our community. And I needed to be in front of people. So I personally went on Twitch, started streaming, nothing to do with Dreamyard. Just me taking care of myself in need of community, went onto Twitch, and I started playing a game that probably Mario 3. It was created in the 80s and 90s, but I'm not the best gamer. But when I went live and told people about the importance of careers in gaming and started talking about what we're talking about now, it just, I don't know, it just looks like a match to the cats, and people just started inviting other people, and now everyone kind of wants to be a part of this community. And now we have parents that are showing up talking about, my kid plays like 15 hours a day, like at least he should make some money from it, right? And now they're seeing, right, that there's a connect between entrepreneurship and gaming in a way that we've never seen before. So Twitch is one of those platforms. And you said earlier, I'm not advocating. I actually, believe it or not, I don't think that it should be like institutionalized per se, but Twitch as a platform and live streaming as a platform should absolutely be used as a tool in pair with Discord, which is also a very important communication tool for community building.
Thank you. And I guess all of that is you're talking a lot about passions and encouraging young people's passions. And Hilary, just moving to you for a moment, you know, all of this kind of like, you know, other digital creative aspects, so fandom and filmmaking and digital music and gaming, you know, they're where young people can flourish and develop. Can you say a bit about how you see those aspects, kind of the importance of that, I suppose, the kind of multimodal approaches in learning?
Yeah, definitely. It's I don't know, maybe it's how I learn, and that's why I lean that way or something, but I'm always looking for my hook or my entry into something. And that there's an easy on-ramp, I guess, or there's multiple ramps. So we keep saying the word ecosystem, but a lot of it is also just community. Like as I listen to Rudy talk, we're just talking about like community building, which is really core to what Dreamyard does. And it's not just like a transfer of skills or come listen to our lecture and then try it yourself. It's really about building relationships, and recognizing that in any class you could have someone who's really into music and someone who's really into dance, and they just came because their friend was here, but they really are a great visual artist. And you need all of that and like everything everybody's got, right? So I think part of it is just community building, even before you think like big ecosystem and all the pathways. Like, how are you building community wherever you are? So Rudy's doing that with the gaming network. You might be a teacher, and how are you doing that in your classroom? I might be a program administrator, and how am I doing that on my team, or with the programs that I'm doing? And then you can kind of go from there of how do you then build your own community, and then how do you start connecting that group to other folks? And then within that, how are you aware of the interest? You know, I think a big thing with the digital media and learning world was, you know, interest-driven education. And how are you really getting to know whoever you're in the room with and what their passions are and what they're good at, so that you can bring that into the project. And so almost anything could be applied. Like my background's in filmmaking, and we needed like different roles on the team. Like it's really hard. Maybe now it's a little easier, but it used to be really hard to make a film alone. And so you needed the camera person and the guy who had, or the woman who did the light, and then the actors. So my approach to art is usually very collaborative. So, and I think I really love that about how Rudy thinks about entrepreneurship and gaming too, that like, oh, you're good at visual art, and like, oh, you're really good at talking. Like you could just banter all day on Twitch. Like that's a huge skill. You got the social person, you get the quiet person back here doing the coding or something. So how are you creating learning experiences that bring in those different multi-modes and those different entry points? And especially when for younger people, they don't always know what they're interested in. So how are you just giving them different things that they can try out? Usually our experiences always allow like a little bit of everything. We name them something that gets the kids in, and then we give them a little bit of everything so they can find like their entry point and what they can offer the group.
Thank you. And I guess that's what you're talking about there with community, is kind of talking about your kind of hopes for the future. So I just wanted to kind of finish off with both of you saying something about, you know, what are your hopes for young people in your community in the Bronx, as we tentatively, hopefully emerging from this pandemic. So I don't know which of you'd like to kick off with that, but kind of hopes for your community.
I hope the world gets to see the brilliance of the young people of the Bronx. Like in so many ways, they are cut off, but they're doing amazing things, and they're so creative and so brilliant. But if they're disconnected, the rest of the world doesn't get to benefit from all the amazingness that is in their minds and in their hearts. And so my general hope is that, and whatever neighborhoods are dealing with the same challenges, that we just get more connected and we stop leaving people out, and we stop forgetting about whole boroughs and neighborhoods, and that we really give everyone a chance, and that we can you know, connect them to good jobs, but also that we build an agency. So we always say like, great, you can teach them to use the tools that already exist, but in the future I want them to create the tools. I want them to build the next apps, or the app that builds the apps. You know, like how can we give the young people that we work with more power so that they can like reimagine new futures and like build the tools and the things that they need to do that in their own communities, rather than trying to like always have to go somewhere else to do that, or fight for their access to things, that they can do that in their home, and then they can take that wherever they want.
I think that's
Yes.
really inspiring for educators everywhere, thinking about their communities and their young people in that same way. And Rudy, how about for you? What are your big hopes?
I also share Hilary's hope, so that's a +1. And I'd like to add that for me, given if I really look at the culmination of all the work that I've done, right, it's this idea of, I believe talent representation should be a right, like for creatives. And what I mean by that is that when you look at the pursuit of a creative career, very often, those who find representation in the form of an agent, a manager, an advocate, right? Or, like a company or a firm that's making sure that they're moving forward, find a lot more of success, which means they meet a lot more people, which then allows their work to be seen. So given all the work we've done with technology and education, I believe if we have 10 amazing coders in the Bronx, there should be someone's job, coordinating that those people are getting what they need to take it to the next level. And my hope is that we have more creatives coming from the Bronx. There is over $120 million came in last year alone in social media marketing and advertising revenue. And then the even crazier part of that is that a lot of those people that are landing contracts are actually somewhere between 8 to 10 viewers, which is nothing compared to, the millions that these big influencers are making. So my hope is that our young people are out there telling our stories, telling our narratives. And because Twitch is an international platform, we can take local businesses to the world. And that's my hope, that by training these content creators, we can lift the entire borough up and their businesses and their dreams.
It's really inspiring. I'm always inspired when I talk to you guys. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. My colleague Rowan is with us.
But yeah, there were a couple of things. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the educational and the entrepreneurial potential. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the sort of therapeutic side?
Yes, thanks, Ron. So I've been, one of my friends recently was licensed to become a licensed social worker, which means she can practice now, right? And for a while, she's always been seeing me post. She's not that much of a gamer, but she saw what I was doing, and her clientele is usually between the ages of 5 to 13. And one day when she got her license, out of nowhere, this was a vertical I was not even expecting, she hits me up like, "Can gaming be used in therapy?" I was like, "What? Can it?" Oh my God. So I got to work, did some research, and what we're finding is that if you really look at it, gaming provides a lot of social emotional skills that folks who either, unless you're an educator and a specialist in understanding what SEL skills are, right? Like you're not going to pick up on them, which means oftentimes that parents don't see the benefits that kids are getting, other folks don't see it. And what we're finding is that when my friend and I started talking, I put her onto Minecraft. That was the first game, right? Because younger ones, they're usually on there. And, I started teaching her on the back end how to use Minecraft so that, her kids won't call her a noob, because that's the thing, right? Like if you don't know how to play, you're a noob, and God forbid, you get called a noob. So what we've been doing is modeling right now, what does group sessions look like focused on mental health while in world, right? So because what she was finding is that once she started using Minecraft with her kids, they started talking about issues that were specific to the things they've experienced in the online world, which is very different from, and I didn't even realize this because now it makes sense, right? Oh, trauma experienced online, will most likely come out, if done online versus in-person one. So we're looking at that. And then I'm also taking Castle's framework for social emotional learning. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with it. Here, I'll link it for you. But the idea, it's this social emotional learning framework. And what I'm going to do is I'm taking that particular framework and we're going to align it to everything that we do around gaming. Because if we have college age students and high schoolers mentoring younger ones, it's important that we teach them about SEL. You can't teach a teacher and not teach them about social emotional learning. And it's just, we're not doing it the formal way, like grad school and education training. No, we're doing it, like to Hilary's point, in community. you are coming in here, and for every community of 10 young people that you moderate and are in community with them, you're able to learn things that are going to put you on a pathway, which, look at that, that has nothing to do with gaming, right? So now we have these young people that are moderators that are enjoying Minecraft, but then they experience something that's like, hey, I want to be a gamer therapist, you know, and then that triggers a whole, and this is why I have to stop using the word gaming, because gaming doesn't really capture it all. You know, if you like finance, there are ways into gaming with finance. It's just, we need to start having the conversations. But as far as mental health, Rowan, that's where we are. We're looking and playing around with the idea of what does group sessions look like, with a licensed therapist in the room who actually plays.
And Rowan, as our kind of resident Minecraft teacher, I'm sure there's lots of experiences you've come across with children when you've been doing Minecraft, where you can see that kind of application as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting seeing children work together in a Minecraft world, and the conversations that kind of come out of that, the kind of community rules that they kind of have to come up with if they're going to work happily alongside each other, and you know, the expectations that they have to have of each other and of their behavior, and yeah, usually in a Minecraft session where, like, you know, lots of children are working together in the same world, there'll be at least some griefing that will go on at some point. But actually, I think that can be a really great opportunity to talk about about respect and expectations, and kind of how to sort of be like a civil, collaborative community and respect one another in that space, because just because it's a digital space, it doesn't mean it isn't real. It doesn't mean that they don't experience it as part of their, you know, part of their world. So I think it can be incredibly powerful for that, and I can see how that could lead to sort of therapeutic applications as well.
That's so cool. And then, you know, you also mentioned, like, and I think it's important to bring up the fact that, you know, when we talk about toxicity, because gaming is usually male identified dominated, right, and boys centric as far as the way it's marketed, right, even though about half of all gamers in the world are women, it's still, you know, taking on the trends of the, you know, the I don't even know how to talk about this anymore, because it's like, the truth is, it's a boys club a lot of the times from when I'm going in, right? And if we don't learn, or the challenge that I'm experiencing is if I doing my work, don't learn how to talk to young Black and brown boys about it, right? Young BIPOC men about it, because we don't really work with a lot of young white boys, to be honest, right? But if we don't talk to young, you know, BIPOC men about this issue, it's hard to break in, because it's a, oh God, not this kind of topic, you know, and that's the feeling they get. And I was in a room the other day with like 4 or 5 male educators who were trying to figure this piece out, because they run the esports teams in their school, right? And they're finding that the boys don't want to play with the girls. And I'm like, before y'all did an esports team, y'all should have talked about this, right? But that's the problem, because everyone is chasing the money, right? With esports and gaming, all these schools are signing up for these esports programs because these startups did a great job at polishing up an MVP, right? A viable product that'll take them in schools. But now we have schools that are signing up gym teachers to be esports coaches, and they've never once played a game, or, you know, figuring out that, oh man, the moment the competition, you know, piece comes in, it creates all these other sets of dynamics. And I saw that trend 4 years ago, which is why we completely said esports, put that to the back burner. Like, that still has, you know, time to go, but it's the community piece, like what Hilary's saying, that really, you know, it boils down to.
Well, we're coming up to the hour now, and I know you've got the rest of your working day. We're at the end of our working day here in the UK, but I know you've got the rest of your day ahead and lots to do. So just a massive thank you. It's fantastic to hear about the inspirational work that you're doing. It's great to connect with you. It's great to be in the community with you, and yeah, and let's speak soon and keep sharing.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. And thanks for letting Rudy and I both do this together. It's really always fun to talk with you, Rudy, too.
Thank you so much.